Hello and welcome to Face to Face. We're talking once again today with Walt McGinnis, and we're talking again about a very important issue. The issue is the so-called BC Hydro smart meters that are soon going to be installed on everyone's home. Okay, so the program we're talking about is the so-called smart meter. I call them stupid meters, call them whatever you want. Program mandated by the Premier or the Liberal government. BC Hydro is doing it, and essentially what they're going to do is put a new electric meter on, what is there, 2 million, 1.8 million homes. No matter where you are, you ain't going to escape this. Every home in the province, every apartment in the province.
Every place that, everybody that has a hydro bill is going to be having their hydro measured by these new electronic wireless type meters. Okay,
cost is $1 billion, they say.
Yeah.
Now, this is before they even start, so let's double it.
Hang on to your hats, folks. We're in for a ride. But they've actually exempted the BC Utilities Commission from oversight on the smart meter program, but also they exempted it from the run-of-the-river projects, oversight on the Site C Dam.
You mean the BC Utilities Commission has been removed from overseeing anything?
So
and the BC Utilities Commission is not a bad organization. It's good, which is why
exactly. As much of it is bureaucratic, at least the BC Utilities Commission goes to bat for you and me. Hydro wants to do something, they have to come and prove their case. It is a publicly owned corporation.
BC Hydro.
BC Hydro. So, but guess what? We are still, you know, not only are we the shareholders, but we are the citizens of the province, and we have rights that we should have access to whenever they're going to do these huge infrastructure programs. Guess what? They have to satisfy us. But you know, Jack, they removed the BC Utilities Commission from the process. I wonder why. You know, if you measure this in any way, and I've said this over and over again, if you're not concerned about the health issues, that's fine, because there's about 5 other major reasons to oppose this. But today I want to talk about the health issues, and why I was really keen on coming in today is because after seeing the Times-Colonist articles recently in the paper, in the Sunday paper, and I think we got to go through some of these statements made in this paper on this day and examine them for factual correctness, let's say.
Okay, well, I'd like to start with, now this is from the Times-Colonist, Sunday, June 26th, the Monitor section. You can see, the Monitor section, you can see, or maybe you can't, that the smart meter is very smart, according to BC Hydro. Now, I just want to read the headline right under that, which says, smart meters tap BC's growing need for power. So smart meters tap BC's growing need for power. Now, that statement is simply not true. The Times-Colonist is taking this story and making it seem like we have a growing need for power. We don't. I would say that that statement is factually incorrect. I would like to see the Times-Colonist prove this to their readers. Prove that you are telling us the truth. Prove that there is a growing need for power.
Look, you know, every claim, Jack, can be shown to have some validity. Gee, we need more power to sell to the Americans. I mean, what part of that plan do you like, Jack? I mean, this is why it's so ridiculous. You know, I could wake up at night and it just rattles me to think, how many things can be wrong with this? But let's get back to what we really have to do here, because I think what's so important is, I'm so happy that the Times-Colonist has done this, because now they've come out and laid out their case, and they put it in writing. And you can examine it any way you want, but today I'd just like to talk about the remarks of our Chief Medical Health Officer, Dr. Perry Kendall. And he made several remarks in this article that really, I don't believe, stand up to scrutiny.
Now, can you just say a few words about who Perry Kendall is and what a public health officer is?
Well, a public health officer is a guy that makes $281,000 a year, for starters. You know, they just published all these salaries last week. Very interesting. And some people actually make more than he does in the public health area. But basically, the health officer of of the province of British Columbia has a mandate to actually look out after the health and safety of the people in British Columbia. And he can make recommendations to the Ministry of Health to set forth guidelines for protection for any number of toxins. For instance, there's discussions right now about tanning beds and such, and they're planning on perhaps making a province-wide ban on tanning beds.
And that comes from the office of the
Provincial Medical Health Officer. Now, what's interesting about that is that tanning beds use ultraviolet radiation, which is a slightly higher up in the frequency range than what we're talking about here, and then we're talking about microwaves. They have the jurisdiction to simply, they could make regulations and guidelines to protect the public. For instance, in the city of Toronto, Dr. Sheila Brazier, who was Dr. Kendall's successor as the Chief Medical Health Officer of the City of Toronto, she called for guidelines for protection from radio frequency radiation 100 times stricter than Health Canada's. Nobody said she couldn't do it. And because they knew, in fact, she was doing her job.
So in the case here with BC Hydro's smart meters, Dr. Kendall, who is our public, what's the exact title?
He's the Chief Medical Health Officer of the province of British Columbia.
So it's up to, and his job entails protecting the people of British Columbia.
Correct.
Okay. And he could do something about this smart meter issue if he said that there was evidence that they were in any way unsafe. But he is saying the opposite. He is saying basically that this is completely safe.
He's basically saying safety is an interesting concept, isn't it? But what's absolutely safe? I mean, you could fall off your chair there and perhaps injure yourself. But the thing is this. He's saying there's not enough, let's say, they use terms like compelling sometimes evidence, or a new word that I've been seeing lately is convincing evidence and credible evidence. These are all in the C's, I suppose. But, credible is another term that they're saying there's not enough credible evidence. And this is shocking to hear. It's absolutely flies in the face of reality. There's just thousands of studies that show that there's harmful effects and exposures at the same level that a smart meter will expose the public to. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of these studies. They're peer-reviewed. They've been accepted. They've been around for, some of them studies have been around for 50 years. And for him to say that, it just doesn't stand up to reality. I'd like to quote some websites, because if people are following this and think, okay, Walt's off on another tangent here, please go to this website. It's www.powerwatch.org.
So www.powerwatch.org.
And it's UK/science. We'll put the whole thing up at the end of the show. Go there. The first thing you see is a few hundred studies. I mean, people say, oh, well, this is just a bunch of studies. Anybody can put these up. Well, you know what? This is as good evidence as you're going to get, folks. You've got to do a little bit of educating. You got to figure this out yourself. Somebody here, Jack, somebody's lying to you. It's either they're going to have to decide it's me or it's Dr. Perry Kendall. And that's a shattering reality that we're into right now. That when our most respected health officials can come out and make these statements, to me, it's just absolutely, I'm at a loss of words for it, because I don't want to say things that disparage him. Either he is terribly misled, or he's misleading the public himself. I just have to say that. Now, we're going to bring the research to him. Not that we're under the illusions he hasn't seen it before, but if we bring this research to him, and we're going to ask him, is this credible evidence? Is this sufficient to take some steps? We're going to be asking him to tell us why this is not credible evidence.
Okay. Now, what we're talking about is the electromagnetic radiation that will be pulsed out of these so-called smart meters they're going to be put on every home and house and apartment and condo, I guess, in the entire province. You will not escape them, and there'll be hundreds around you in all your neighbors' homes. Now, these are going to be putting out electromagnetic radiation on an ongoing basis. Now, maybe you can just tell us, since we're talking about what Dr. Kendall said, tell us, what did he say?
Well, that's the first thing, the issue about that he didn't think there's enough evidence to show that there's any harm. And as I say, go to powerwatch.org and look at the evidence yourself.
Do you have a quote from him or something that he actually said or alluded to?
Well, I have the quote right here. That he gave Patrick Duffy in the article on Sunday.
So this is in the Sunday issue of the Times-Colonist, June 26th.
That's correct.
Quoted in the newspaper, the story by Andrew Duffy in the Monitor section, and this is what Dr. Kendall supposedly said.
Yeah. I don't think there is any convincing evidence that the levels of radiofrequency radiation that we are being exposed to are in fact causing harm. That just flies in the face of reality. I mean, what sort of convincing evidence does he require? I mean, this is what we're talking about. There's study upon study upon study, Jack. You know, are we trying to prove absolutely anything? No. We're saying there's just enough evidence to take some steps to protect the public. You know, this is what's so hard to take for people that have been involved in this issue, is to think that no, they can't take any steps to protect our kids in schools from the wireless technology, from Wi-Fi in schools. You know, the World Health Organization designated wireless type radiation, such as emitted from a cell phone or from a smart meter or from a Wi-Fi system, as a possible carcinogen. Now, Perry Kendall says the recent designation by the World Health Organization's International Agency on Research on Cancer that placed radiofrequency radiation as a possible carcinogen as being based upon one study with weak evidence.
Are these your words, or are these...
This is exactly out of the article. These are not within quotation marks in the article, Jack.
So the article says that Kendall claims that the
decision by the World Health Organization was based upon one study with weak evidence.
Right.
Now, if you actually go to the International Agency on Research on Cancer, and if you Google that, and we'll give you the website. The statement in the website is this: the working group considered hundreds of articles. So the people that actually did the designation say right at the top end of it, they say they considered hundreds of articles. Dr. Kendall says it was being based upon one study with weak evidence. If we are to believe that what the Times-Colonist is saying, and in fact, if this is not in quotation marks, so they could have gotten it wrong, boy, but they ever got it wrong. And this is misleading, Jack. And, you know, these are the sort of things that are just simply not acceptable. You know, when you have a newspaper and a medical health officer collaborating, and if they're not checking their facts any better than that, and the public's relying on that information, you know, we're in trouble here. These guys have to back up their claims with real solid evidence. Why is it that we have to spend so much time as citizens, you know, working so hard to try to bring this case forward, and when our health officials can just glibly say whatever they want and seemingly get away with it?
Now, I'm just going to ask the question again about the Times-Colonist. Ladies and gentlemen, as you're watching this program, you know, is the Times-Colonist working in the interest of you and your family? When this is the, I mean, you know, the story suggests, and they do a story also, concerns raised over safety and pricing.
Yeah.
So they do bring up the issue, but do they do, I mean, you know, when I read through this, it kind of comes, no, that's where they have the story about how there's nothing to be concerned about.
Exactly, and all the quotes from our medical health officer are in that section, Jack. And it is the whole section is full of distortions in my view. it is just simply, if they can just make these statements and not have to back them up. Now, I'm looking at a letter I've written to the Times-Colonist, and by the time this program is shown, we'll know whether or not they've printed it or not. So, we have to look at the statements that were made. And I think getting back to when Dr. Kendall said that this was based upon one study with weak evidence, with a very low risk factors shown. But what he doesn't mention it also within the articles that the agency considered when they were looking at how to designate radio frequency radiation. There was one study. I'm just going to read this to you so we'll have it correct. This study was from Leonard Hartnell, and he's a researcher in electromagnetic radiation. He found age as a significant factor, and this is very similar to power line issues and childhood leukemia, and we can get into that some other time. But this is basically what they found. They report repeated findings that were found in other studies, that the use of cell phones before the age of 20 increased the risk of brain tumors by 5.2 times. Now, a review by Hartnell and company concluded that current mobile phones are not safe for long-term exposure. That was accepted. That's a peer-reviewed study. That was part of the analysis that the International Agency for Research on Cancer used. But, Dr. Kendall didn't feel that it was important to perhaps warn young people that maybe they shouldn't be using cell phones, that their risk factors skyrocket, 5.2 times more likely to have a brain tumor compared to people who don't use them.
Is it a brain tumor or a specific kind of brain tumor?
Well, they just say increased risk of brain tumors by 5.2. There's several different types of brain tumors, so I don't have the details on that. We're going to list that website. The public can go to this and to read it themselves. This is powerful evidence that there is cause for concern. And there's no scientific reason, Jack, to think that the radiation from a cell phone or the radiation from wireless internet or the radiation from a smart meter is any different. It's the same technology, more or less, in the same frequency ranges, more or less. The thing is, the public really has to understand is that there has been no safe threshold set. So even though they might claim, oh, these are low power, and and they'll use terms like that, what does that mean? In lab tests, they can get cancer cells to grow with minute amount of radio frequency radiation. So to use those terms is meaningless scientifically. And for a medical health officer to use those terms and to gloss over these issues, it really is concerning me.
So I think what you're saying is that you think that our provincial public medical health officer should be at least suggesting to the people of this province that there may be some reason for concern in this story. And yet, here on page D7, concerns raised over safety and pricing. The first couple of paragraphs of this story are quotes from a woman by the name of Sharon Noble, who's involved in this issue, and she lays out a little bit of the case as to why there is cause for concern. And then it goes on immediately into Dr. Perry Kendall, and his first statement, I believe, in the story is, Provincial Health Officer Dr. Perry Kendall said the smart meters are not considered a public health issue. Now, maybe you can tell us why there is any issue with these smart meters. How are they emitting electromagnetic radiation?
Well, basically, a smart meter is, what we had in our houses right now are these old analog meters, which is just a little, so it's like an electric motor. There's some coils in there. When power flows through the meter into your house, when you're consuming power, it just makes the coils activate and they turn and you.
It's a very old technology.
It's old technology, but it's like rock solid.
There's no need to replace them.
There's not whatsoever. I'm an electrician, by the way. I've seen quite. I've been at it since 1973, so I've seen a few meters. And I'm really trying to remember when I ever saw one that was actually malfunctioning.
Okay. Now, it's going to cost us $1 billion, it's going to cost us BC Hydro users $1 billion just to put in these new meters. And then there is this safety issue. How do they radiate? Why do they radiate?
Well, what they're going to do now is, before, a guy would have to come out and read your meter and see how much power you consumed, and then they'd send you a bill. What they're going to do now is they're going to have built into the meter, basically it's cell phone technology. And it's going to report back to the command control center wirelessly. It's going to blast a signal out into the environment, which is going to be picked up in a grid type of system. It's like a WiMAX system. And that all that information is going to get sent back to command control, and they're going to know what your consumption is by the second, basically, if not by the minute. So that's all wonderful, and it's supposed to be all under the guise of saving energy. But in the end term, you know, we're going to have meters that are transmitting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, Dr. Kendall is parroting what BC Hydro is telling him about how long these meters are transmitting. Okay, I'm just going to read again the short part of a paragraph from the Times-Colonist story on Sunday the 26th. And this is in quotes, so I guess Dr. Kendall is being quoted, and he's saying that according to BC Hydro, the meters are only reporting back, on average, less than a minute a day. It's not 24/7, he said, noting that the impact is a long way from that of Wi-Fi or cell phones or baby monitors, which he said are also considered negligible. So he's saying that BC Hydro is telling him that the meters only operate a minute a day. You'd have to really wonder what's going through his head. Why is he mentioning these other items if they're safe? Obviously, he must have some concerns. I mean, he has to. But the thing is about the radiation itself is, and particularly the way these meters work, is the meter that I did test, and also we have a website that you can go and you can watch a smart meter in operation, and you can see it's operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, it only sends pulses out, maybe a micro pulse every 1 minute, every 3 minutes. It's just a little bleep. The information goes out, and then it rests. Is it every 1 or 3 minutes, or could it be every hour or every 5 hours? They could have it broadcasting every second if they want. It all depends how they program it. Could they broadcast once a day for a second or a minute? Perhaps they could. But the ones that I've seen, and the one that I measured, the ones I've been reported on, the ones that Cindy Sage Associates have measured, all are transmitting every 2 or 3 minutes a microburst of energy. Okay. Now, so you see the problem, folks. It's not that they're operating for 1 minute a day, and if you happen to be out during that minute, nothing happens. It's every 2 or 3 minutes, it sends out a microburst of electromagnetic radiation through your home and your neighbor's home, and your neighbor's doing it to you as well, I guess. And it's constant, and it's, I guess, is it a fairly strong pulse, or is it? Well, I measured it. It does penetrate into the building 20 feet, and Cindy Sage and Associates, so I think we're going to list that website, are going to show you what those readings are. They're significant. Can't be ignored. And particularly, Jack, we haven't even entered into the big picture, which is all the appliances in the house are all being mandated to have wireless technology built into them. What's the feeling amongst people in the public health field about this issue, or what does Dr. Kendall say is the feeling amongst public health professionals? Well, I'll read you the quote. He claims the possible association between mobile phone use and cancer risk warrants further study. The consensus of public health practitioners is that the current exposure levels to EMFs does not constitute a threat to the health of the public. So he's basically saying that there's a consensus amongst all the public health officials. You don't have to look too far, and you're going to find a lot of dissenting opinions. How about in Vancouver? The ex-chief medical health officer of the city of Vancouver, Dr. John Blatherwick. And we interviewed him this spring when we were in Vancouver at these open houses that BC Hydro is hosting. And Blatherwick is quoted as saying, he says, Safety Code 6, which is the guidelines for protecting public health in Canada from radio frequency radiation, Safety Code 6 is grossly out of date. because it is based upon tissue heating. The health effects we are discussing are a result of what is called non-thermal effects or non-heating effects. He also claims that Safety Code 6 needs to be updated and upgraded.
So made stronger or better to protect
More
us.
protective. That doesn't sound like consensus to me. Now, I did mention Dr. Sheila Basseur, the ex-chief medical health officer of the city of Toronto. She gained that position right after Dr. Kendall vacated it. And Dr. Sheila Basseur called for guidelines that were 100 times stricter than Health Canada's. That doesn't sound like consensus to me there. And also in Great Britain, Great Britain's Health Protection Agency did a review on Wi-Fi in schools, and we're going to list that study. But this is what their chief medical health officer said. Speaking about his review of the evidence for health risks linked to mobile phones and masks, published in the year 2000, Sir William Stewart said, there may be changes, for example, in cognitive function. There are some indications that there may be cancer inductions. There were some molecular biology changes within the cell. These are issues that we had to bear in mind. Now again, this is the chief health officer for all of Great Britain saying that there are concerns for health. This is not consensus, Jack. And for Dr. Kendall to say that there's consensus, I don't think is accurate. That there's a lot of debate going on right now. What do you think is happening in the World Health Organization right now? You know, if we followed this organization for years, they're very, very conservative, let's say, if not absolutely just impossible to change. For them to come out and to make this designation now that classify radiofrequency radiation as a possible carcinogen, which is a class 2B, most of the people that are involved in this issue are alarmed because we know that perhaps it should be designated as even more of a stronger designation as a probable carcinogen, perhaps.
So in other words, you're saying that when the World Health Organization finally does something, you know you're in trouble. Well,
I really think that something has happened. I think they've finally relented. None of this evidence is brand new. They could have looked at this evidence 5 years ago and made this designation. So we are looking at the world's so-called leaders in health protection in this area making these statements. And we have a chief medical health officer in the city, in the province of British Columbia, that doesn't seem to want to go along with them.
So there you have it, folks. I'm sorry, Walter, we're out of time. The smart meters are coming to your home very soon. They're going to take out your old electrical meter, which has been running very well for the last 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50 years, and replace it at very high cost with a new one. Cost is about $1 billion. And there is a health concern from these new smart meters. At least a lot of people think there's a health concern. You can call your 1-800 number for BC Hydro or look them up in the phone book. You can call the Minister of Energy. You can call the Premier, because it's from the Premier's office that Hydro is being told they have to do this smart meter program. Walter, any last comment?
Tell them that you're not happy with the situation. Tell them that you don't want them to proceed. Tell them you don't want a meter on your house. You know, if enough of us call, Jack, they have to get the message sooner or later. They have to step back. We're asking Hydro, we're asking Christy Clark to step back and take a second look at this program in its entirety and really, really do the right thing for the people of this province and protect our health.
Tell them you don't want one on your house. You do not want one on your house. If you don't, if you do, great, you're going to get one. Thank you for watching Face to Face.